Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Liane Henschke, Executive Director of the Tennessee World Affairs Council, a nonpartisan and nonprofit organization that promotes global literacy, international awareness, understanding, and connections to prepare Tennesseans to thrive in an increasingly complex and connected world. We would like for you to become a member and enjoy the benefits. Visit TNWAC.org. Today, we are here to present the International Careers Panel, made of distinguished and recognized speakers who will be introduced by the moderator, Dr. Gretchen Neisler. I am sure the panelists' experiences will serve as an inspiration to schools and university students, young professionals, teachers and faculty, and members of the World Affairs Council. I would like to send a special thanks to Mrs. Lynn Brown and Mr. David Carroll from the World Affairs Council of Greater Reading, Pennsylvania, who helped us to advertise the ICP to many institutions. Let me introduce our moderator of today's panel. Dr. Gretchen Neisler is a board member of the Tennessee World Affairs Council and Vice Provost for International Affairs at the University of Tennessee in Knoxville. She works with faculty, staff, students, and key stakeholders to understand and deepen their engagement as global citizens. Dr. Neisler has successfully managed over $120 million in grant funding to support the work of international research and development. She believes higher education must support students in understanding their role as global citizens and use the institutional strength of knowledge creation to solve global challenges the world faces. Dr. Neisler worked for 20 years to build global networks that enhance research productivity and preparing a new generation of leaders to take the world stage. She is an experienced leader with strengths in organizational change and team development. She holds a PhD in higher education administration from Michigan State University. Thank you for being here, Dr. Neisler. I now hand it to you.
Thank you, Dr. Henschke. Good afternoon to all of our participants. Welcome to our panel discussion on international careers and the pivotal role of global experiences during your college years. Today, we embark on a journey to explore the significance of cultivating a global mindset in an increasingly interconnected but polarized world. As we stand at the crossroads of unprecedented globalization, it is imperative to recognize the transformative power of cross-cultural encounters, language proficiency, and international exposure in shaping careers and fostering global understanding. In our rapidly evolving landscape where borders blur and cultures converge, the demand for globally competent professionals is at an all-time high. Whether pursuing careers in diplomacy, business, academia, or the arts, the ability to navigate diverse cultural landscapes and understand the nuances of global markets has become indispensable. Thus, the question arises, how can college experiences equip students with the skills and the perspectives needed to thrive in an international arena? Throughout our discussion today, we will delve into the multifaceted benefits of international exposure, ranging from enhancing intercultural communication skills to fostering empathy and cultural competence. Our esteemed panelists who boast diverse backgrounds and expertise in various fields, will share insights, anecdotes, and practical advice gleaned from their own journeys navigating the global landscape. Moreover, we will explore the myriad opportunities available to college students to immerse themselves in international experiences, be it through study abroad programs, internships, volunteer work, or research initiatives. We will uncover how these experiences not only enrich academic learning, but also broaden horizons, challenge assumptions, and inspire personal and professional growth. May I ask the panelists to please turn on their cameras and allow me to do a brief introduction. For a further note, their full biographical information can be found on the Tennessee World Affairs Council website, tnwac.org. To begin, I would like to introduce Dr. Sarah Fisher Gardiel, Dean of the Jack C. Macy College of Business. Dr. Gardiel joined Belmont University in 2020 as the first woman dean in the Massey College of Business. Prior to Belmont, she was the dean of the University of Iowa Tippie College of Business, and she held college and campus leadership positions at the University of Tennessee, Knoxville, including Associate Dean of the Haslam College of Business and Vice Provost for Faculty Affairs. Dr. Gardiel has an extensive background in business and business education. For over 30 years, she has personally engaged with industry in research, consulting, and executive education roles, as well as creating mutually beneficial partnerships between higher education and industry. Dr. Gardiel has served on public and private for-profit and nonprofit governing boards. In addition, she is an active public speaker for corporations, conferences, women's leadership events, and industry associations. She is an outspoken advocate for women in leadership, as well as organizational diversity and inclusion. Welcome, Dr. Gardiel. Thank you for your time today. Mr. Lou Finter is a U.S. Foreign Service officer. Mr. Finter is a retired Foreign Service officer currently serving as the Department of State's diplomat in residence for Indiana, Michigan, Kentucky, and Tennessee. He also served in this capacity in 2019 to 2021, following 2 years as embassy spokesperson in Kabul, Afghanistan, his second tour of duty there. Just prior to retirement, he was assigned to Kosovo, assisting with the relocation of Afghan evacuees in August and September of 2021. Mr. Finter began his State Department career in 2003 as a press officer at the department's Washington, D.C. headquarters. This was followed by assignments as embassy spokesperson at U.S. missions in Afghanistan, Iraq, Pakistan, Yemen, Kosovo, and the U.S. mission to NATO. Prior to the State Department, he worked as an epidemiologist for 12 years at the U.S. National Institute of Health, or NIH, followed by U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, CDC. He also previously worked for several years as a journalist in Washington, D.C., News Bureau of the Los Angeles Times, the Hartford Courant, and the Detroit News. Later, as a freelance writer for several other local and national publications. He holds an undergraduate degree in journalism from the University of Michigan, Ann Arbor, and graduate degrees in journalism from Washington, D.C.'s American University in Public Health and the University of California, Berkeley. He completed 4 years of postgraduate work at McGill University in Montreal, Canada. Mr. Finter, thanks very much for being with us today. Ms. Penelope Thomas is a leader at the United States Agency for International Development, also known as USAID. Ms. Thomas is a development diplomat in residence for the Office of Human Capital and Talent Management's Office of External Outreach and Strategic Recruitment. Ms. Thomas began her career with USAID in 2002, serving in Pakistan, Nigeria, Colombia, the Dominican Republic, Jamaica, Barbados, Guyana, Bangladesh, Mali, and Egypt. She also served as operations chief in both the command center in the Office of Security at USAID, Washington, and the Management Bureau's Overseas Division, where she was responsible for supervising, training, mentoring, coaching, and hiring new executive officers. Ms. Thomas has lived and worked abroad since 1979. She was a Peace Corps volunteer in Gabon, Central Africa, and she has worked with several international development organizations, including AfriCare and the African Methodist Episcopal Church Service and Development Agency. Ms. Thomas holds 2 bachelor's degrees, one in French and one in Spanish from St. Olaf College. Thank you, Ms. Thomas, for being with us today. We appreciate your time. Ms. Sue Koo also is at the U.S. Department of State. Ms. Koo is the Domestic Outreach Coordinator for the Office of Press and Public Diplomacy at the Bureau of East Asian and Pacific Affairs in the U.S. Department of State. She previously served as the Communications Director at the Governor's Office of Community Initiatives and the Chief of Staff for Maryland's First Lady under Maryland Governor Larry Hogan's administration from 2019 to 2022. She covered a wide range of assignments in international relations, international procurement, media relations, multimedia marketing, and more. Prior to this, the executive director of the International Leadership Foundation, a national nonprofit headquartered in Washington, D.C., she placed hundreds of students in federal and congressional internships and trained and consulted thousands of youth, professionals, and entrepreneurs. She was recognized with the President's Volunteer Service Award in 2016 and an award from the Federal Asian Pacific American Council in 2018. In 2020, she was selected for the list of the top 40 Asian American Pacific Islander political operatives and public affairs professionals under 40 by the National Association of Asian Pacifics in Politics and Public Affairs. Ms. Koo received a master's in government from Georgetown University, a bachelor's in political science from Awa Women's University in South Korea, and executive training at the Harvard Kennedy School. Thank you, Ms. Koo, for being with us today. Thank you to all of you for taking the time from your work to share your expertise and success with our participants. This is truly a unique opportunity for all of us to learn from you. Before we get started, I want to say a brief word or two about the format of our panel today. I will present a question to a specific panelist and ask them to provide their insight. After that, any panelist is free to provide other information and to round out any kind of answers to the questions presented. We will be monitoring questions coming in the chat and we'll answer these questions towards the end of our discussion. I encourage our participants not to wait to formulate their questions if something occurs to you as we're going along. If you're anything like me, you will forget by the time we turn to those questions, and I want to make sure that we answer as many of your questions as possible. And at the end, we will turn it back over for a brief update from Dr. Henschke about some upcoming Tennessee World Affairs Council programming. So let's get started, shall we? So I'm going to direct my first question to Dr. Gardiel. The transition between school and work can be a complex moment. What suggestions can you give to those just starting their careers or those now in higher education who would like to pursue a job in academia similar to your own?
Thank you, Gretchen. Happy to jump in here. I will say that the preparation starts before you graduate. There is so much to be done. And if you're at a four-year institution, you have the real privilege of being in an environment that is resource rich in terms of the number of things that you can be doing to prepare for a job in an international environment. I have to start by saying, in the College of Business, everything's international. Now, you may not be, living abroad, but there is just not an industry that you can name that isn't completely interconnected by monetary systems and supply chains and vendors and customers and all those kinds of things. And so in the College of Business, everything gets taught in terms of a global context, because there's just no such thing as a sole US context for things. But let me just say this. I think that students sometimes think about the curricular side of things. Are there majors? Are there classes? Of course there are. And there will be language classes. There will be classes in international business and economics and policy. Those cut across the campus, and you should be looking at those to kind of build, especially in your curricular area, a breadth of perspectives on the international environment while you're here, whether that's in liberal arts and science, whether that's in the College of Business, whether, there are just so many places where you can pick that up. But I really want the students to also pay attention to the co-curricular activities. And that is what's going on outside of class. And what are you doing when you're not pursuing your major or your co-major, whatever those things are. Whether those are student organizations that focus on international careers, and those are absolutely there and in place, whether those are study abroad or travel abroad or internship abroad opportunities. You really have to think about the entire 4 years, including what are the classes that make sense, that are going to give you that kind of knowledge and skill base that you're going to use, but as well, put yourself in a position where you are in communities of other students and faculty who are pursuing international topics, international careers, those kinds of things, and get plugged into those activities as much on a leadership basis as you can, get abroad as much as you can. And those two things really have to come together and fit together. But practically any campus that you think about is going to have a variety of those kinds of activities that can help you.
I cannot agree with Dr. Gardner more. So I think what she said is absolutely extremely important. So just want to add a couple of things echoing what she said. So yes, every school is international. So my experience is with Georgetown is a great school. I love my school. When I was in Georgetown for my master's degree, even though my major was political science and governance, I took classes about anthropology in the Middle East area, in China, and transitional justice studies in South Africa. So great classes and opportunities inside my campus. So I would recommend that while you keep your focus. And if you're in Korea right now, and thinking about going back to school sometime later, I would say explore your specific interests. Actually, I went to Georgetown right after my college graduation, but thinking back then, I'm like, maybe I would have picked business school or MBA. That could have been helpful for me. So it's a good lesson I learned. I mean, even though I still, as I said, I still love Georgetown and my major. So I would recommend that. And then see what your supervisors or your bosses or your leadership learned at school. Maybe they studied, they got a business degree or even communications degree, something like that. If there is a particular person you want to follow, and then if there's any particular position you want to be in the future, learn from your supervisors, and of course, explore financial assistance opportunities. That will make your life much better, and then you can focus on your study. And if you are in higher education right now, absolutely, internship, that's important. Networking, that's important. I really want you to do intentional, focused, and strategic networking because your time is valuable. And utilize your alumni. I'm sure that every single school has a great group of alumni, and they are willing to help you. Well, the worst answer is just no response, right? So don't be afraid of reaching out to your alumni and then talk to them. And again, I totally agree with Dr. Guardiola. 4 years, you should prepare. You should think about what's ahead of you. And then don't just assume that, oh, I'm going to get a job right after college graduation. Maybe that's not the case. So think about, what if I'm going to have a little bit of a gap between college or master's degree and your future next job? Think about what you are going to do to fill the gap, and how are you going to explain the gap when you have a job interview in the future, because you're going to ask that, you're going to be asked that question. Over.
Thanks very much. I just wanted to throw out a quick follow-up that occurred to me as I was listening to both of you. So Sarah, you made a comment about breadth and depth and the strategic importance of that, which I wholeheartedly agree. And Sue, you made a comment early on when you started speaking about getting experience that is also broad, in the sense of what kind of cultures and countries are you looking at? And I'm curious, and any of you can really respond to this, but what are your thoughts on a student or an early career professional looking at a specific region or country focus for their study or for their work? Do you feel that that is strategically something in their best interest, or should they early on stay broad and explore and soak up as much as they can, and then maybe as they're advancing in their degree program, that then they begin to narrow in the funnel of that?
So I'll jump in to that question. I grew up overseas. My father was in the United Nations, and he worked in Africa. So I had a heavy Africa focus, from 1979 on. But then once I joined USAID, I had a mentor who told me something, and it was the best advice that has helped me at USAID. Because a lot of times at USAID, you might get someone that might be focused and they're like an Africa hand, or they only want to serve in Latin America, or they only want to serve in the Middle East, or they only want to serve in Asia. And as you rise up in your career at USAID, it's important to demonstrate a breadth of skills. And one thing that they look at is, do you just know about Africa? Because USAID doesn't just work in Africa. And my mentor said, I encourage you to serve in every place where we have programs, in every region. And the only place I haven't served is in Europe and Eurasia, but I've been to Africa 2 or 3 times. I've served in Latin America. I've served in Asia. I've served in the Middle East. And because I speak French and Spanish fluently, that has also helped me, because USAID has said, oh, well, we can send you to Latin America. And then my next assignment can be in French-speaking West Africa. But again, we are looking for people that are able to thrive in a lot of diverse cultures, because the culture in Pakistan, where I just recently served, is not the same in Nigeria. And if you just focus on one geographic area, I think, at least to be an employee at USAID, I think it's a disservice to you, because you really need to be able to relate to people from different continents and different cultural backgrounds, different religious backgrounds. I've served in a lot of Muslim countries and Christian countries, and just the differences in that alone. So my advice would be always to diversify. Don't pigeonhole yourself to one region. That's what I would advise. Over.
Thank you.
Yeah, if I could just jump in really quickly, Gretchen, and really echo what the other panelists have said. 3 really brief things that I always tell students and mid-career professionals who are applying to the Foreign Service or to the Civil Service in the State Department is to apply for everything that you are interested in and eligible for, to be persistent in applying, because very often these programs change from year to year, and the timing, may just not be right for you in terms of the size of the program or the number of successful applications that they can accept that particular year, but that could change the next year or the year after. And finally, not to count yourself out. I think a lot of students in particular that I talk to, they sort of preempt their application to programs that they would be great interns for, or fellows, or employees. And we all do that from time to time. We say, why would they be interested in me? Or what do I bring to the table? But let the organization do that. Don't do that for us. Believe in yourself, believe in the skills that you bring to the table, the experience that you have, and just throw your hat in the ring.
If I can jump in, thank you. So yeah, I agree with Penelope and Alu that, don't narrow opportunities that might be right in front of you. Don't be too much obsessed with just one option or two options, or the plan you have, and then just try to explore as much as you can. I think what's important is, if you look at Penelope, like, who's very successful at USAID, covering all different regions and areas, it's because I believe she has transferable skills. So let's say that, I'm interested in Japan, and then I learned Japanese language, and I learned about Japanese history, something like that. And then when you get experience from your choice, think about what transferable skills you can get, and you can apply them for other regions or other experts. So, well, in the reality, time is very limited. You cannot master all different languages. You cannot master all subject matters. I've seen so many brilliant people here at the State Department. I think, Lou, you agree with me. Some people they master 7 or 8 different languages. I am not as brilliant as they are, but anyhow, the time is limited, but try to think about sort of universal values at work. What is that? Cultural humility, your attitude to try to understand other people, other cultures, and understand diversity and inclusion, be communicative. I don't think language matters. Your willingness to be communicative with others, that's important. You can apply those sort of soft skills anywhere you work and whatever you cover. You can't be an expert of everything, but you are able to be an expert of working together with other people on different subjects. So you can definitely do that. So that's my one piece of recommendation.
Thanks, Sue. You've totally set us up for transitioning to our second question. So I appreciate that. This question I am pitching to Ms. Thomas first. Most colleges and universities are preparing professionals with skills to fulfill existing jobs. However, as jobs change, what kind of technical and soft skills, as Sue just mentioned, should we learn and develop to enter a career like yours? Now, we've spoken some about this, but I wonder if you could put a finer point on this, and also draw in some of the conversation earlier around remaining broad in your focus, but also taking that deep dive into some areas.
Thank you for the question, Gretchen. It's a good one. I believe that, again, stay broad, stay open. You're going to have a specific major. For example, I majored in French and Spanish, but I remember early on, I was convinced I wanted to be a simultaneous interpreter in that box at the United Nations. And my father worked for the United Nations Development Program. And he said, "You think that's what you want to do?" I said, "I'm sure, Dad." I was, 13. I was like, "I'm sure, Dad. I just want to do that. That is the coolest thing, to be up in there with the head speakers and talking." And so little did I know that his best friend was an interpreter. And so for spring vacation, he sent me to Geneva for 2 weeks to sit up there with her in that box. That was the worst thing that he could have ever done. I thought I was going to die and I was afraid I was going to live, because I realized that I was an introvert. I was like, all of that talking and speaking every day and changing every 15 minutes. I wanted to escape that booth. And she's like, oh no, we are going to be here all day, every day for 2 weeks. And after 2 weeks, I was like, Dad, I'm good. Thank you for that experience. But maybe I want to do, maybe I just want to just be a translator, which, people often confuse translators and interpreters oral, translators written. And so I said, maybe I think I just want to do that, where I could just sit in my own corner and just write documents. And, it's very lucrative. But I would say the most important of all of those in terms of soft skills and technical skills, the thing that is really important for you is to know yourself. Because by me going up in that booth, it helped me realize that I'm really an introvert. And I did not like all of that talking. And I don't think I had done my research. And sometimes things look more glamorous than they are. I was also a backup singer for Prince. And I used to sing with a group called The Sounds of Blackness. And so then I was convinced, oh, I want to be a famous singer. Oh, I'm sure. I just want to do that. I know I'll hang my hat on that. And then, of course, singing backup for Prince, I was constantly in the studio all the time. And I was like, well, that's not fun. All you're doing is you're in the studio, you're behind the microphone. When do I get to get out and go to concerts? And so then we went to concerts. And then I was like, man, you have to be at the concert hall at like 11 o'clock for hair and makeup. I was like, well, I don't like that. And so I went through about 8 different careers before I realized, and I have to say that being a development diplomat in residence, this is right up my alley. I get to mentor, I get to coach people, I get to talk about what USAID does. And then also overseas, I get to sing at the American Embassy functions when they need someone to sing the national anthem. So, all of that requires interpersonal skills. It requires technical skills. You have to have people skills. You have to have interpersonal skills. You need to be able to demonstrate that you can work in a diverse environment. The world is becoming increasingly diverse. And so as a Black female, I've had a rough time at USAID because oftentimes I haven't been understood. And people will look at me and they can never really figure out what my ethnic background is. They'll say, you speak so well. And I don't know how to interpret that. Or they're like, oh, I didn't know you were biracial. You're half white, you're half Black. And sometimes just, when I was in Egypt, people thought I was Egyptian. When I was in Dominican Republic, they thought I was Haitian because I spoke French. In Haiti, they thought I was Dominican. Now I just tell people I'm from Fiji, which I'm not. I'm from the United States. But, people never know where I'm from. But I mean, it's a nice talent to have, to be able to kind of mix in and sort of, feel that you can really adapt to the culture that you're in. So I think we just get oftentimes, pigeonholed into, I just want to be a singer. I just want to be an interpreter. I just want to be the Secretary of State. I just want to, be an admin officer, when I think you don't have to have that level of specificity. But if you know yourself, you're going to know what you really like and what you don't like. And you need to do that self-analysis early. I didn't, which is why I suspect that my dad said, okay, I'm going to send you to Switzerland up in that booth. Let's see if you really want to be an interpreter. But not everybody has that chance or has that luxury. So you have to know yourself. Over.
In colleges of business and in higher education, I would just say more broadly, one of the things that we realized is that the technical skills are changing all the time because of technology, because of globalization, because of a changing world environment, because of AI and Bitcoin and all kinds of things. And so, the skill set that you get on the undergraduate side for sure has a kind of a limited shelf life in a sense. If you came back to us 5, 10 years later, it would look different because we're trying to change and stay relevant. So those skills are great and they will get you launched early in your career, but then you're going to need to continue to learn. And it may be a degree that you come back to, it may be on the job, it may be certificates, those kinds of things. But the technical skills are things that will just continue to evolve and you never get to stop. You never get to get off that bus. However, on the soft side, those are skills that will serve you your entire career. And those are exactly the things that Penelope was talking about when she talked about your interpersonal skills, your ability to work across cultural lines, your communication skills, your team skills, your critical thinking kinds of skills. We did an exercise recently where we went out in every field and said, what are the most important things that you're looking for? And we expected to see a lot of field to field variation or differences. And it turns out that they all converged at the top around those really important soft skills. Because if those are intact, those will serve you for the rest of your career. And that is the basis by which you'll continue to grow and learn and have the experiences that you need. And so what I would say is oftentimes our students get very focused on the technical skill side of things. And I think that's important, but it's not enough. If you're a good technician, like I can just make Excel hum, right? But I can't, communicate with and work with other people around the world. That's going to be the huge limiting factor, not the technical skill. And so what I would say is, again, I think in terms of the 4 years that you're here, what are you working on? Keep reminding yourself that putting yourself in positions to develop and accentuate those softer skills are really key to business success or to career success over time.
Thank you very much for adding that. I would also tag on that any university that is really paying attention to the external landscape is actually thinking about how we are preparing our graduates for jobs that do not yet exist.
Exactly.
And as a student, that is also how you should be approaching your academic work.
Right.
So I think that makes the connection then for you to consider what are the non-technical skills that you're building during your time at the university, every bit more important. But I would also say that those skills are also the ones that you will continue to develop and hone throughout your entire career.
True.
I am still learning how to be a better communicator. That became very present to me as a mother and as a wife, that I realized my communication skills were lacking. And also, I think that it is really important because you can share with a potential employer that this is something you have an awareness of, and you can speak from a framing of your strengths and then begin a discussion about how you see yourself as a lifelong learner and you are working on continuing to develop these skills. I also want to go back just to make the segue for us to our next question, but to something, Penelope, you were talking about, and that is this not wanting to close yourself off and do too deep of an assessment or too deep of a dive into a particular area. I mean, to share even from my own background, I really thought I was going to be the equine veterinarian to secretary at the racehorse. And then when I was a senior in high school, he died. And so my dad said, so now what are you going to do? And I said, well, that's a good question. So I regrouped and went off to school. And then I ended up actually overlapping in time with Lou Finter in Pakistan. And I ended up working in Pakistan. And my dad said, man, kind of wish you were the veterinarian for Secretariat now instead of living in Pakistan. So I think the message here is you need to have a plan and you need to have a strategy. Don't overplan. And I think also it's very interesting to listen to other people's journeys to help you keep your door open. And so with that, I'm going to transition to Lou Finter and ask you, Lou, if you were to ask yourself 10, 15, 20 years ago, what would you be doing professionally now? What would you have said?
That's a great question, Gretchen, especially for me, because, 15 years is like just a minute for me. I mean, I could go back 45 years and ask myself, would I think I'd be doing this right now? And I think the answer for me to that question is absolutely not. I've had 2 other careers before the Foreign Service, and that is really quite common in the Foreign Service. Most Foreign Service officers come in around 35 years of age, because you can come in until you're 59 and a half. I would say in my case, I certainly when I graduated from college, I mean, I knew everything, of course, like many college graduates. And so I just knew, I was going to be a journalist, and I wanted to, expose, malfeasance and write educational pieces and be this crusading reporter. Well, as I was fortunate, I was able to do some of that early on in my life, but it led me into other areas. So I wrote about science, I wrote about health, and became more and more interested in public health. And so that led me to go back to school and get a graduate degree in epidemiology. And then that led to a completely different career in epidemiology that was also, quite rewarding and interesting. And then that in turn led to a career in international affairs, because, of course, many disease issues have an international focus. Diseases really no borders. So that led me back, to communication and to international affairs. So I guess what I would say is, I would just remind or some of the older participants here and really tell the younger ones that we change over time. That as my colleagues have pointed out, certainly these fields change and technology changes, but so do we. And so what you're interested in right now may not be what you're interested in 15 years from now. And that may not be what you're interested in 30 years from now. So definitely be open to change, roll with it, go with it, and be open to opportunities that present themselves to you, because that will happen too along the way. You'll meet people that will inspire you along the way. I know I've met many people that have inspired me and mentored me even into my 30s and 40s. So that will continue to happen, and definitely be open to change, be open to trying something new and different, and contributing to something new and different.
I want to throw in an educational piece, and so you actually indicated this earlier about something about what graduate degree, those kinds of things. The really great thing is that in higher education, the direction for graduate degrees is to go online or at least hybrid. And when that happens, you have the ability to stay in your job, but do graduate work on the side wherever you are. And so the whatever degree you decide you might need or additional education beyond your undergraduate is not something that you're going to have to pull up stakes and go back and be in a classroom for a couple of years anymore. That accessibility is just global at this point, and that creates opportunities that actually were never available for me when I was coming along, and probably for Lou as well. And so now the opportunity for you to continue to get your work experience, where amazing skill development is going on, but to also study something on the side, and to do those things simultaneously is just being facilitated in a way that is never happened before. So, you know, the opportunity for higher education doesn't stop when you leave the campus.
Thanks. If I can jump in, so I would start with a couple of the technical stuff. So either you're in school right now, or you're in your first or second job in your profession. Number one, I will always write down what you have done and what you have accomplished. So it's basically about managing your portfolio, and then check all the verbs. Like what did you actually do? Did you manage something, or did you orchestrate something, or did you develop something? So once on my wall, I had sort of like a map of my activities and all the sticky notes and verbs and accomplishments, and I categorized them. And it's very clear. Later, it came very clear to me, oh, this is my consistent interest. Sometimes it's actually different from what you thought you'd like. So I think that's a good practice. Keep writing your bio and then thinking about your elevator pitch for your networking. So, you know, practice yourself, and whenever someone asks you, oh, so who you are, what do you do, what you like to do, and then you can answer right away, because it needs some practice. And always do market research. So what I realized like 5 or 6 years ago, maybe that was already too late. DEIA, diversity, inclusion, accessibility, and that topic has been so popular everywhere. Like environmental justice practice became really popular in the private sector, in the public sector, in the nonprofit sector. So I realized that, oh, this is something I need to learn a little bit more about, even though I'm not an expert in the field, because it's everywhere. So do market research, what's trendy. I mean, you don't need to be too much obsessed or always try to follow trends, but just need to understand what market wants, what market is looking for. And if you are in job right now, really try to get training opportunities and short-term education, or even going to conferences, and ask for your employers if they're willing to support you. And then that's also another good chance that to prove that, oh, I am the person who want to continue to learn. And then once I learn, I want to bring the resources and network back to this work. So please do that. And of course, concise speaking, presentation skill, and writing skill is so important. Many of my bosses, like ambassador or governor, they didn't have time to read like 20-page report. So like always like, hey, Sue, what's your 3 big bullet points? Or 5 bullet points, no more than that. So I really needed to know how to summarize comprehensive information from here and there, and then how to customize it for my supervisor or even for external stakeholders I communicate with. So that's important. And beyond technical stuff, I've been always interested in public service. And then I spent pretty much time thinking about why I want to do that. So if any one of you are interested in public service career, my recommendation is, are you a type of person who are interested in serving communities that are disproportionately affected by policy making? So like, because I myself, I'm a 1st generation immigrant plus Asian American woman. So I've been always thinking about how I can help women in vulnerable populations or indigenous peoples. So I would recommend that sort of self-reflection. And then you should be interested in delivering voices of people who need representation to decision makers. You should be willing to be a facilitator in between the two sides. So think about that. And one last note, if you're interested in international relations, there's so many different opportunities, not just at the federal government or at the national level, state level, local level, each local government, county executive's office, governor's office. They have local Department of Commerce, and they have international affairs team, international development office. California, for example, the state is the 4th or 5th largest economy in the world. So they have a huge office of international trade and investment. One of my bosses, she was director of California's Taiwan office. So she worked in Taipei. So yeah, international relations is everywhere. So explore opportunities. You can start from the city you're in, the state you're in. So go from there. Over, thanks.
Thanks, Sue. And I want to just ask you to maybe think about this from a little bit different perspective. And that is, can you recall any kind of pivotal stepping stones that really either shaped your thinking from a career perspective or helped you to move into a different direction? And by stepping stones, I'm not necessarily talking about a formal job that you have, because I think it's important for us to say that while employers really have an understanding in their own organization, what's an entry-level position, where are they likely not going to hang on to employees for long periods of time? And in essence, those positions are really building you as an employee in the same way as a stepping stone does. But that's also very visible to employers when they know that you are utilizing this job to just promote yourself. So what I really want you to speak to is, what are the moments that you realized, and being, true to what you were saying, like understand yourself, understand what's important to you and what serves as inspiration. What were those pivotal moments when you said, okay, now I see a different trajectory?
Thank you for the question. Yeah, so I consider stepping stones for myself, moments that I just grew as a person. So as you mentioned, not necessarily, sometimes that, those stepping stones did not necessarily connect me to a new job or with a higher salary or something like that. But so first one is, I should talk about COVID-19 pandemic. So I work at the Maryland governor's office when COVID hit the nation, the world. And before that job, I was actually trained at Harvard Kennedy School. And then the main topic was leadership in crisis. We did a team practice, model practice. So at the time, I was like, yeah, it's important. Leadership is, of course, it's really important in emergencies. Yeah, good lessons learned. And then I was thrown into the reality during the COVID-19. So I was involved in the governor's COVID-19 task response task. And then there were so many different task forces. And it was like the intensive process of learning so much about crisis communication, crisis management. And the one good lesson, actually looking and then my boss, Governor Hogan, it is in times of crisis that good leaders emerge, right? I think you all agree with that. So I was able to see, oh, this is what leadership means. This is what commitment means. This is what public service means. That we worked like more than 100 hours per week to save lives. Very simple, just one purpose, one principle. We all get together and work very hard on the goal. That was really the time that I realized, as I mentioned earlier, we need to think about how to protect the people who are disproportionately affected by what's going on. We established Minority Community Recovery Task Force, Vaccine Equity Task Force, because some communities and some groups of people, they didn't have like equal access to health resources or health information at the time. So good experience. And then the second is, after that, I moved to State Department, again, thanks to one of the ambassadors here. It was just a serendipity. I went to a networking event. I had a very clear goal. Oh, I'm going to talk to this person. I'm going to introduce myself, and I'm going to tell him what I want to do. And then he's like, oh, you were the one I'm looking for. So join my team. So very lucky. And then I joined an APEC team. And then that was a completely different scale. I did state level work. I did nonprofit work. And then now it's international. And then APEC meetings invited presidents, vice presidents, and prime ministers from 20 different member countries, including the United States. So it was a huge. And then I felt like, oh my God, I'm just like a tiny part of the big picture. But still, I was able to, this is how things work when like a high level conversations are involved in. And what I really realized at the time is, again, I mean, this is one lesson I got like throughout my career. Sort of like skill sets such as like event coordination and the protocol type of work. and how to support the executives or leadership, that's really important. Some people I've witnessed that some people think that like, that's not policy and analysis work. Oh, maybe that's not important work, but actually that's really important. Sometimes you are going to be asked to do a lot more work like that than policy making or policy analysis. That's really important for APEC level meetings or governor level meetings or state level, city level meetings. So please remember that there are like so many different pieces of international relations work. So it's not just writing a paper, presenting a paper, and sitting in front of your desk and then do a lot of analysis work, because a lot of students, hundreds of students that I've come across, they ask me, oh, I want to be a policy analyst. I want to be a policy maker. Okay, if you want to do that, you need to go through some steps, and then you need to understand what your supervisor bosses want to do, and then supporting them. That's really important. It'll give you so many lessons. Over.
Thank you very much. Thanks. So you actually said a lot of really critical things, and I want to continue on this thread. And Sarah, I'd like to ask you the next question. And I know that this question will be very relevant and really significant for all of us. But Sarah, if you could kick us off, and that is your advice around cultivating a professional network. And what would you say to our participants today about, how to do that right now, and what you found in your own experience, and all of you to be thinking about this in terms of what has that network meant to you throughout your career? You're muted.
This is a great question. And I was actually thinking about tagging on to Sue's comments with it anyway. What I tell the students sometimes is that, in the best of all worlds, you only have to apply for one job. And it's your first one, right? And then after that, if you're doing your job, opportunities are going to come to you because of who you meet, who gets to see your work, who you've reached out to. It's just amazing how that works. And when I think about the stepping stones, I'm going to tie it back, Gretchen, to your earlier question. One of the key stepping stones for me that led to where I am in terms of leadership in higher education was a conversation that I had. And it was a woman that I saw at a conference, and I was so impressed by what she was saying. And I went up to her after the presentation was over, and I said, I would love some advice from you. Can we have coffee together at some point during the conference? And she said yes. And she said something to me that I still remember today as the one that totally turned my head in terms of what I was thinking about. I think what students don't get a lot of times, and especially the undergraduate students, is the importance of networking and the importance of being proactive with it. Networking is not going someplace and waiting for people to approach you, although sometimes that happens. Networking is a combination of you reaching out to people who have something that you think would be great for them to share with you and being curious about that. I've never met anyone who wasn't flattered by the opportunity to talk about what they did and their successes and those kinds of things. And especially, early on in your career, you almost have license to go to those people and say, would you sit down with me? Can we meet? Can we have a cup of coffee? Those kinds of things. And 99% of the time, the answer is going to be yes, because they also understand how important those kinds of conversations were with them, and they're happy to have them with younger people. But what it takes is initiative on the part of the student to say, oh, these are the kinds of people that may have, some ideas, some jobs, some industry experience that I would be interested in knowing about, and then reaching out and making that connection. So I just can't say enough about the importance of networking. It really is something that you have a great deal of control over. I think a lot of times students, again, feel like they should be on the receiving end of those kinds of things. But again, early on, your ability to reach out to people and ask for the question in the meeting, the thing that you're interested in or curious about, is just very open-ended, and you have no idea what's going to come out of it. But I will tell you this, I have also continued to do that with the rest of my career. I can trace myself back to that one important conversation, which was probably in, maybe my early 30s, something like that. But I have never stopped identifying the people that I would like to meet. And it's not because, I think they have something for me or that I'm going to use them in some way. It is about pursuing your passions and your curiosity. And if you're in that frame of mind, always, you will have wonderful conversations, and some of them will turn out to be very pivotal to you.
I agree with Sue and Sarah and everything that they talked about in terms of stepping stones. I know something that has been a great stepping stone that has really helped me also cultivate a professional network is I used to volunteer at my local church. And I got that from my grandmother, who we were always feeding the homeless or, providing clothing or taking meals somewhere, Meals on Wheels on Sunday. And I'm a member of the African Methodist Episcopal Church, AME. And a lot of times in movies, you'll see that people go to AME churches to speak. And so it's a pretty large denomination in the Black community. And so there's always an opportunity to volunteer. And so I remember I was working at another NGO, and I really had a desire to help my church. And so after work, I was working at a place called Africare. And after work, I said, well, let me go and see if the Service and Development Agency, which is the international development arm of the AME Church, let me see if they need help. Because I was living in Washington, D.C., and my grandmother was kind of pushing me to, like, what's that building? And, so I went there, and they're like, oh, yes, we're trying to receive some money from USAID. And I said, well, do you have an HR section? Do you have a finance section? Do you have a director of international development? They're like, no, but can you volunteer to help set up all of those things? Because we're trying to get money from USAID. And I was like, okay, well, I mean, I can volunteer a couple hours, after work. And that turned into them offering me a job. And I was like, oh, no, I'm good. I have a job. But I mean, I'm just really trying to help. And they're like, what would it take in terms of finances to bring you over here full time? And for me, it wasn't even about money. It was about a chance to be around bishops and a chance to be around the missionaries. But, I talked to my grandmother, who was a close advisor of mine. And, she said, you have a chance to work for our denomination. She's like, I think you should take it. You get to be around all these famous people. And I was like, well, they're only famous to the AME church members. But it did turn into something else, because when I was volunteering and we finally got a grant from USAID, and I became a contracting officer and like a program manager and an admin officer. And so there were some people that I caught the eye of at USAID, and they're like, have you ever thought about applying for a contracting officer? And I was like, oh, no, I'm good. I'm just here working at the church. I'm just trying to help them. And they're like, no, because we think you'd be really good in the federal government. And so as Sarah said, one job really kind of bled into the other, which kind of bled into the other. Because I really, even though my very first job at 17 was a summer intern at USAID, I really had no desire to work at USAID at that point. I was fine working for the church and helping out. But once I got into USAID, I used those people. Well, not used. I took advantage of the people that had reached out to me, that had influence in the church community. They had influence at USAID. And I remember going to them and saying, well, now that I'm in USAID, would you be my mentor? And, there was a Black woman, a Hispanic woman, an Asian woman, a white male. And I was really trying to, so to your other question about what advice for cultivating a professional network, I reached out to everybody. I had secretaries, I had admin officers, I had assistant administrators at USAID, I had mission directors, deputy mission directors, because they all played a role in giving me different advice, and it came from different perspectives. I didn't just have a Black female who was, in a position that I wanted to be in. I found that diversity was very helpful, and if I said, hey, I'm in a particularly difficult situation, and I have to tell you that my very first mentor, he's retired from USAID for 15 years now, and he is still my mentor today. And he makes it a point every Tuesday, we have a conversation. He'll reach out, what are you facing? What situation? Okay, let's talk about this. And sometimes I'm like, oh, can I just take a break from mentoring this week? He's like, no, there's something going on. And so every Tuesday, I live in Atlanta, but if I'm up in Washington, D.C., we must have lunch. I was just telling him the other day, just yesterday when we had our mentoring session, I said, I really appreciate that throughout your career, you mentored me, but now you're retired and you still continue to mentor me, and you still continue to introduce me to other people that that can help me. I mean, when I was first coming along, I never would have guessed that our friendship would have flourished. And I just got married recently, and he was the only person at the wedding, but he was the best man and sort of, like the godfather of our relationship. And so it's helped professionally and personally. Over.
Thank you.
Gretchen, if I could just jump in just really,
Sure.
really briefly. I think in my case, as an undergrad, I was, first an undeclared major. I didn't have a major the first couple years at University of Michigan, but I just by chance saw an open call at my campus newspaper, the Michigan Daily. Didn't really know anything about journalism or think that was something I'd want to do, but went. Got involved with the campus newspaper, started writing and reporting as a student, as an undergrad. And that really opened up a whole new world for me and a whole new career for me later on. But I think in terms of networking, also at the same time, universities are great resources. They were for me with alumni groups who have mentoring components. And so you can kind of tap that resource while you're in school. I know I did, was able to reach out to reporters, professional reporters who had volunteered to do mentoring through the Alumni Association. And then also even, professionally, everywhere I've worked, we've had professional societies and volunteer groups within the organization that involved volunteers, other employees who volunteered to mentor, whether it was an employee affinity group or whether it was a professional society outside but affiliated with what I was doing. And so those resources are there. You just have to really look for them and then tap into them.
Thank you very much, Lou. That was great. I am mindful of our time, and also I want to let the panelists know that the questions are pouring in. So I am going to sort of move over to the questions that our participants are posing, and I'm going to do my best to ask the questions in the order that they're coming in. So I'm not going to try to group them together. So they'll be sort of on random parts of our spectrum here today. So the first question that we received has not sort of specifically asked any panelists, so any of you free to jump in. But the question is, AI has exploded in the last year and will have profound consequences to the job market. What do you see as consequences of AI in your professions?
I'll start this off.
That'd be great.
People will be using AI in all kinds of ways. I think the first thing that people think about is AI displacing people. Well, because of AI, these jobs are going to go away. And so there's a little bit of, I don't know, maybe fear mongering around that. I mean, obviously, as technology changes, what skills people need and what can be taken over by, a computer, that changes all the time. I mean, think about I don't know if any of you guys saw, oh my gosh, what was the movie with the women that did the math behind the trip to the moon? I'm looking at Penelope on this, but
Figures.
yes, Hidden Figures. You had a room full of women that were by hand doing calculus that was plotting how to get a rocket into space and around the moon. Well, if you told people that they were going to be hired to do that anymore, that's nuts. We've got computers that can do that like that. Of course, that's what technology brings us. All right. So what I will say is, yes, the marketplace of what jobs are available and what kind of skills that you need always are changing, and AI doesn't need to be the boogeyman in this. But I will tell you that when we first started having conversations nationally, a lot of the conversation was, how do we keep students from using AI because they're going to use it to cheat on exams or projects or papers that they're writing or whatever. And first of all, that's crazy. You can't stop AI. It's out there. It's everywhere. It's going to be used. And so the idea of building a wall so that people aren't exposed to AI is just crazy. But more to the point, in every industry, people are using AI for all kinds of things. In public relations, they're using it to gather data and put together fact sheets and those kinds of things. Obviously, they're using it in data analytics to solve particular problems. If you go into any industry today and say, how are your people using AI now to help facilitate their jobs? There are amazing examples of that. So I would say the first thing is, don't be afraid of AI, but you need to understand AI and how that might be used in whatever industry that you are going in or job function, because it's there. And I think our job in higher education is to start getting students to use AI productively in terms of the kinds of things they're doing, because that's what they're going to be asked to do once they get out into their jobs. And so my first answer would be, learn it, understand it, start thinking through what AI can do within organizations, and be comfortable with that, and be comfortable with using that as a skill set that you need to have.
Yeah, thank you. That was great. The next question probably would be, I think, useful if Lou and Penelope started us off, but the question is, has personal safety become a factor in considering working abroad?
Lou, I defer to you first. We've talked a lot.
Oh, no. It's a great question. And it does come up, very, very often, especially in the context of Penelope and I talking about some of the places where we've served. And I think, the answer is yes. I mean, personal safety has become even more important, and it continues to evolve as a really important issue. I think the challenge for us and the struggle for us in the international affairs community is, where do we strike that balance between interacting, getting out, engaging with people abroad, and even here in the United States? Because, what I tell students and potential applicants is, where is safe? I mean, these days, we see in the news all the time, unfortunately, these situations right here domestically. You just never know when or where something's going to happen, and whether you'll be, in the wrong place at the wrong time. But the challenge is, you can't live your life in a fortress, right? You can't live your life behind barriers. We've got to be able to engage with each other. We've got to be able to talk to each other, to learn from each other. And to do that most effectively, we have to do it in person. And so I think we're still struggling with that. I mean, I think we're going to continue to struggle with the answer to that. There are those who are certainly quite risk averse. And then those who, just want to kind of throw caution to the wind and get out there and get in the trenches and do. But there has to be a balance there somewhere. I'm hopeful we can find it.
I would thank you, Lou, for your great answer. I would just like to add, as diplomats overseas, sometimes we do have targets on our back. And I'm sure Gretchen and Lou, when you lived in Pakistan, I'm not sure when you did live in Pakistan, but it was my last assignment. And I left in January of 2023, but we were living on the compound. And before I joined the Foreign Service, but I think it was in 1999 where they had the Secure Counterterrorism Act, I think after the embassy bombings in Kenya and in Tanzania, where they required all federal agencies to be on the same compound. And then, we're protected by regional security officers, but we have, the bomb checks for the cars, IDs, visitors access requests, those types of things. But I think it's really important for your personal safety is to just be vigilant and not try to be a rebel when you're overseas. I mean, in Pakistan, we had a curfew and we couldn't go out from 1 a.m. to 6 a.m. And if you did, then that was, you're violating the security protocols and you will be sent home because the ambassador's job is to make sure that we are all safe overseas. And so I think a lot of times the people that haven't done so well as diplomats are the ones that kind of want to push up and challenge. Well, if the regional security officer said I can't go to this area of town, I wonder if I can sneak and go to this area of town because, I don't want to be, hemmed in to just the embassy. And I think once you realize is, we are here to do diplomacy development. And there are going to be times where you are in what's called a non-permissive environment. When I lived in Nigeria, we just simply couldn't go up north. It was dangerous. They were kidnapping and killing people all the time. And we just didn't go up north. It made it challenging because we did have to report to Congress how we're monitoring and evaluating our projects. But I think explaining that, we are, because they wanted to make sure that the money that they're giving is reaching the intended recipients. And sometimes just explaining that we are operating in a non-permissive environment and we can't go up there, but what can we do within the parameters of security? And I think, it struck me also when I was in Egypt, we had armed guards outside of our doors when I was in Mali. And I guess it's probably something that, the president, secretary of state, and anyone that has a security detail, you just kind of realize that they're there and you just continue on with your business. But I remember a family member came to visit and they're like, those men standing outside your door with guns, that doesn't bother you? And I was like, oh, I've just become so used to it because they're here to keep us safe. And they're like, but do you really want to be in a profession where you have to have security guards outside of your door? And I was like, this is a life of public service. And that just comes with the territory. And so, you have to be smart. You have to be vigilant. You have to listen to those security advisors around you and realize that, there are going to be some risks, but we can mitigate and minimize the risks if we really pay attention to those that have the current intel on the threats that we're facing. Over.
Thanks, Penelope. I just want to add, if any of you are looking for ways in which you can begin to sort of assess your own threshold for risk, and you want to better understand that at a personal level, I recommend reading the book, The Gift of Fear by Gavin DeBacker. This will be an excellent way for you to gain some insights into how to really listen to what your mind and your gut is telling you about situations. And also, as Penelope stressed, situational awareness. And so if that's something of interest, you might check that out for an additional resource. Okay, so let's move on. This is a question directed directly at Dean Gardiel. How do you see the prospects for working overseas in business, given the competition from foreign nationals for positions in multinationals? Is that an issue?
I will just say, and I think I'm maybe echoing Sue on this, the need for the jobs that we're talking about here and the skill set that we're talking about here, and people who are willing to do things that cross those borders and cultural lines is huge and growing. And so it's not a fixed pie that you're going to have to share with other people that are already out there. Every company, starting with the major multinationals that we would think of course they have those kinds of people, but all the way down to mid-size, and even some of the smaller companies now are realizing that they have to have this kind of skill set and capacity within their organization. So I will just tell you that our experience is that students who want to have internships in foreign countries, and a lot of times those turn into full-time jobs. By the way, an intern is a great path into a full-time job, or just full-time jobs. I think they go about their job search a little bit differently, perhaps, than the people that aren't looking outside of this country, but they are fully employable. I don't think the demand is at all an issue there.
Thank you, Dr. Gardiel. If I can add a couple things. So just entering into the competition, I think that's a great experience for you. And of course, if you are thinking about like either working in business, private sector, or in public sector, if you're thinking of working overseas, that's a great opportunity for you to learn about like multicultural understanding, multicultural communications. That's really important skill sets and assets. So, I mean, I myself would highly recommend it, but at the same time, overall, we've been talking about like risks when we decided to work and live overseas, either in the private sector or in public sector. I mean, you really need to think about like what kind of person you are, what you want to do. So living overseas, it's not a simple choice. It's pretty complex. So for my case, I am not a foreign service officer because I have other reasons that I would like to stay in the United States, but at the same time, I want to make contributions to U.S. foreign policy. So there is a way to do that. So myself, I immigrated from South Korea to the United States like 13 years ago. So there was a big move in my life. So I don't necessarily intend to leave overseas again, like back and forth. But still, like the State Department has different opportunities, including the one I have right now. So think about that factor as well. I mean, getting skill sets and experience is all good. But also think about like what kind of lifestyle you want to have. So that will help you make a good decision. Oh, work and live here in the United States or overseas. Over.
But if you've had overseas experience, I think that helps you everywhere in terms of your next job, whether it's abroad and they can say, oh, you've been abroad and you understand what it means to live and operate in a different culture. Or if you bring that knowledge back to a US based company, oh, excellent. You've had that experience. And so the kinds of things, again, like study abroad, work abroad, internships abroad that you can do are widely valued, regardless of where you want to land in terms of your job. And think long term as well. I mean, if you're a typical undergraduate at this point, the kinds of things that you can do over time are just immense. You are a generation who has been identified as one that is not afraid of changing jobs, changing careers, those kinds of things. And I would just say, especially while you're younger and while you don't have the kind of ties like kids and mortgages and, those kinds of things that might, keep you from moving too often, do it while you're young, right? And who knows what that experience is going to create for you in terms of future opportunities. You will never regret it. Regardless of where you end up, you will never regret that opportunity to work abroad.
I totally agree with you. Age doesn't matter, but there's the right momentum for you to do certain things. So don't forget about it. And then my case, I was born and grew up in South Korea. So when I came here, I thought that, oh my God, I have a language barrier, I have a cultural barrier. But like a decade later, it is turned into my strength. So I understand Asian culture, Asian language, so many different tasks and responsibilities I can carry based on my background. So yeah, overseas experience, that's excellent. That's excellent asset for you.
Thank you very much. So mindful of our time, we have about 6 minutes left together in this live session. I'm hoping we have time for these last 2 questions. And one of them, I'm going to take moderator's discretion and get us kicked off on this, because this is a topic that's really important to me. The question is, how does one manage work and family life when working in an international setting? And both Sarah and Sue, you've touched on this just a little bit, but I would like to just share a personal anecdote. I started working overseas for a university, for Michigan State University. And when I was doing regular travel overseas, I had twin boys that were 10 months old. And so my kids grew up with me working out of the house in another country. And at the time, most of my work has been traveling in and out. And I would go for a couple of weeks, come home for a couple of weeks. And truthfully, that is how they got used to engaging with me. And truthfully, during COVID, they kept saying, don't you have someplace you have to go? Like, why are you here all the time? And so I think that there is a way to balance. I actually no longer use that word balance anymore. I try to integrate my work and my life, and hope that whatever ball I might drop in any given day is not one of my family members. I do prioritize that, but I want to just sort of stress that if you're passionate about something, whether it is in your personal life or your professional life, you will figure out the cadence that works best for you. And I also cannot stress enough that I really think that I was a better mom to my kids because of the travel I was doing and what I was bringing into our house and what they were learning. And I think I was a better professional in working in these other environments because I was a mother and I knew that I had this responsibility to bring all of this global learning back into my family. So I'll just start us with that, but I don't know if any of you have anything you'd like to add. And then we have one other question, and I'm going to give a little preview so we make sure we leave enough time. And that is, the question has been posed about what are the internships that are available, which is a really important question to many of you on this panel.
I want to just say that work-life balance is an issue wherever you are, whatever you're doing. There may be some unique qualities of it when you're in a country where you may not necessarily have the kind of knowledge or networking or whatever that you have to overcome to do it, but everyone needs to be asking that question. And I agree with Gretchen. I've thrown out the word balance now. To me, it's like the teeter-totter at the playground, and you're doing this all the time, right? On average, you're balanced, but it doesn't mean that you spend your life in that balance saying, everything is aligned. We're just right there on it. It's this. And what you're doing is you're managing that flow of your energy. And sometimes you're going to tilt and lean into your career a little bit more. And then you make sure that there are times when you're leaning in sufficiently to your family and your personal life. That's what you're managing, not some perfect state that is unattainable.
Thank you. Thank you. Does anybody want to say a quick comment about where they can find internship information after we leave each other today?
if I could jump in really quickly, at the State Department, we have 3 different kinds of student programs. So we do have internships, but we also have fellowships, and we have exchange type programs at the department. We have a dedicated website that is our opportunities website for student programs of all types and professional programs, so civil service and foreign service. And that's careers.state.gov. So careers.state.gov. That is a different website from our agency website, state.gov, which is where you can learn lots of things about the State Department. But if you're interested specifically in opportunities, you want to go to careers.state.gov. And our programs are always evolving, they're evolving constantly. We just started completely funding our student internship programs. So now internships with us are paid, come with transportation and housing, whether they're domestic internships or they're overseas. So that's an important advancement I think we've made that many of us have lobbied for at the department. But we have another website, the Educational and Cultural Affairs website, ECA, and they handle just exchange programs and educational programs. So in addition to careers.state.gov, go to the Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs, ECA. You can find that link at state.gov, and you'll find lots of information about those kinds of programs. And finally, we work very closely with contractors and with NGOs at the State Department. So definitely, don't focus exclusively on the State Department if you're interested in careers with us or student programs, because those are great opportunities for you to actually be working in the building, in the State Department, or in an embassy abroad, but working for Oxfam or Save the Children or Lutheran Relief Services, or many of the NGOs that we work with abroad, or contractors like Deloitte. So you can also go to their websites and you'll find short-term opportunities and student internships. Over.
Thanks, Lou.
If
And
you're on a
thanks-
campus, go to your career development or career service office, or anything that says international programs. And between the two
great
of them,
advice.
they'll get you there.
Great advice. Or your global office, if you're looking for something internationally, with any of those hubs would be happy to help. So we have heard so much rich information today. I can't thank our panelists enough for their time. And thanks for bringing us your wisdom and your passion. As we close this enlightening discourse, let us heed the words of Helen Keller, who famously said, "The highest result of education is tolerance." May our engagement and learning today serve as a beacon of inspiration for the next generation of global citizens, equipped not only with knowledge, but also with the empathy and understanding necessary to navigate our interconnected world with grace and wisdom. Thanks so much, everyone, for joining us today. We're glad that you spent some time with us. We hope that you gleaned some useful information. If you would like to go back and listen to any portion of this program, know that it will be archived and available on the TNWAC.org website. And now I'd like to hand it back over to Dr. Henschke, who will provide a brief announcement.
Well, thank you to all panelists. Thank you, Gretchen, for these fantastic presentations, which are so important for TNWAC's audience. Education, lato sensu, as the baseline for our personal and professional life. As we continue the Council's program, every month we have something to share with you. Our next event is going to be April 11 at 5:30 p.m. It's an in-person event at Belmont University. We will welcome Frank Langfitt. He is an NPR international correspondent from Washington, D.C. And more to come in May as well for a webinar and also in person. please keep checking our website. And also consider joining as a member and supporting us to carry out our mission. Thank you all, and goodbye for now.